What's up guys, I'm Jacob Suggs and welcome back to another video. And because I talk a lot about comic books and stuff like that, I've gotten countless messages from fans and friends saying, what's your favorite comic book movie? Or at least like your top 10 that you would choose if you had a gun up to your head and had to pick your top 10 favorite comic book movies. What would you choose? We don't know. Well, thankfully, I've got you covered. But I'm not going to be doing my top 10 because honestly, I love so many comic book films because there's so many great ones I can think of right now. I love so many of them that it's just hard for me to pick 10 in a row that I really genuinely love. And number one is pretty solid, but it's kind of hard for me to do that. And so I've always found top 3 to be much easier to narrow it down to 3 comic book movies I really love. I did the same thing for Best and Worst in that collab that I did with Houston for the 2016 movies. So I figured I'd do the same thing here, and that's what we're gonna do. Top 3 best comic book movies, in my opinion. And if my picks aren't your picks, please don't get offended or anything. I probably love your picks too, but in my opinion, these are my top 3. But it's not just going to be me giving my top 3 best comic book films and eventually top 3 worst comic book films of all time, in my opinion. I'm also doing a collaboration in this video and the next video with MariaTheGerman. If you don't know who she is, she's on a website called Vidme, which I use a lot. I love Vidme. It reminds me of the glory days of YouTube. There's just so much positivity on that website, I can't even describe it. And Maria does a good job of, kind of spreading the positivity. She's really awesome with that kind of stuff. And she's a gamer, so she plays a lot of Star Wars Battlefront, a game which I love it. And she plays Overwatch, one of my favorite games as of recent years. That's a great game. You should play Overwatch, not sponsored. But I'm doing a collaboration with MariaTheGerman in this video, so she's going to be giving you her top 3 comic book films of all time. So without further ado, since she's my guest on the show, I'm going to let her go ahead and go.
Oh, wayo! Hi everybody, it's MariaTheGerman here, and thank you to Frame by Frame for having me on this episode. My top 3 best comic book adaptation films will be number 3. It was hard to put any of these to number 3, like to actually order them, but number 3 for me would have to be Civil War. Now, it's definitely one of the best Marvel films they've made, but I had to put it at 3 just because that's my gut feeling. I loved it so much. Definitely one of my favorite bits in that movie is the introduction of Spider-Man. You just have to love that dynamic that obviously Iron Man and Spider-Man have. It's just so great to see Spider-Man really nicely portrayed as the kind of smart-assy, funny guy that he is supposed to be. And you can actually finally see that he's one of the strongest superheroes because he's supposed to be the strongest. So it was you could kind of see it in that film, which was amazing. I really like that. Obviously, also loved the introduction of Black Panther. How can anyone be so cool? I don't know, but I am excited for the film on its own. Same for Spider-Man. I'm excited for their own films. Super amazing. And then obviously, no one can forget that epic battle scene they had at the airport. I just love that scene. It was so dynamic, really cool. Probably has to be one of the most epic fight scenes in any of those films. So number 3 goes to Civil War. Number 2 for me will have to go to Doctor Strange. Now, I did not know much about Doctor Strange before I went to see this film, so I kind of went in with no expectations, and I have to say, when I went to see Doctor Strange, and I went to see it twice, I was blown away. Visually, this is such a stunning work of art, and especially, I did actually want to see it in 3D as well. It was just mesmerizing, all these mirror worlds and how just everything was folding into each other. It was just so visually stunning that you were just mesmerized. At least I was. Obviously, this is another great thing that Marvel does. It's such a perfect mix of humor and action and drama. It's just, I don't know, it makes it just so enjoyable to watch. And Benedict Cumberbatch was such a great cast for Doctor Strange. Loved it through and through. And my number 1 best comic book adaptation film would have to be Deadpool. I loved Deadpool. Now, there's many reasons to love Deadpool. One of them being that Deadpool isn't really a superhero. He's kind of like an anti-hero. Then you have to obviously love it for it being very much not safe for work. And then obviously, like, even like the brutality of it is very, very there, which is great because you don't really get to see that in the other Marvel films. And obviously, I loved the fourth wall breaking. It was just so perfect and perfectly used. And the humor in that film was just out of this world. Ryan Gosling, loved his performance. All in all, this was just one of my favorite ones so far, but there's so many more coming out. It might change this year. Who knows? Thor Ragnarok, I cannot wait.
Link to Maria's channels will be in the description below. Check her out on Vidme, check her out on YouTube. She's really awesome, has a lot of awesome gameplays like I've said before, and can't recommend her enough. She's awesome. So without further ado, here's my top 3 favorite comic book movies. At number 3, it's Spider-Man 2, not The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That movie sucks. I'm talking about the original 2004 Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man 2. In my opinion, it's everything that needs to be perfect in a superhero movie. Not only do we care about Spider-Man, but we really care about Peter Parker as well. The whole movie is about the duality between the two characters going on, like who's the one really wearing the mask. And it's hard for Peter Parker to balance out being Spider-Man and being a college student. Something I'm aware of because I'm a college student and also a part-time superhero. But the whole movie's great, and when you have a really awesome villain like Doc Ock, you just can't beat it. And that train sequence still blows my mind to this day. Everything holds up in this movie, and it's one of my favorite superhero movies I've ever seen. It's more than just a superhero movie, and I feel like calling it a superhero movie isn't doing it enough justice. It improves on the first Spider-Man in every possible way, which I think that's a great movie, and it just showed that superhero movies could be something more. We'd been proving that in the past, and it just continued the trend, and it still holds up to this day as one of my favorites. At number 2, I have more of a controversial pick, and that's Watchmen. Now, I love the graphic novel Watchmen. I read it my sophomore year of high school, fell in love with it, and believe it or not, somehow I managed to get Watchmen issue number 1. I don't know how I managed to get this. The guy sold it to me for $10. Probably didn't realize the massive mistake that he made. And I know that director Zack Snyder kind of has a bad rep right now after Batman v Superman, which I like, don't get me wrong. And he is a bit style over substance, but I feel like Watchmen is the peak of his career. For the longest time, Watchmen was said to be unfilmable, and to certain degrees, I still agree with that. But the film that we got, especially the director's cut and the ultimate cut of this movie, are fantastic. There's barely any violence in the graphic novel of Watchmen, so when there's a lot of blood at the end, it seems consequential, whereas in the film of Watchmen, there's a lot of violence in the film, but at the end, there's almost no bloodshed in the final third act climax, making it almost inconsequential. And so those two kind of separate the film and the graphic novel for me, but both endings still work in my opinion if you want to know my thoughts on that. I don't hate the film for trying something different when it's so faithful to the graphic novel for the majority of the film. It's visually stunning. Obviously, you're going to get that with the Zack Snyder movie. Everyone knows that. But there's a lot more to it, and I feel like it's one of Zack Snyder's most cohesive films, and it's a great, great movie in my opinion. I know not everybody is, hooked on this movie, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth your time checking out. It's not for the young kids or like the faint of heart by any means. But if you want a really hardcore, psychologically captivating superhero movie, you don't need to look further than this. Unless you want to look at, well, my number 1. Okay, this is kind of going to be cheating, but let me explain a little bit. My number 1 favorite comic book movie of all time is the Dark Knight trilogy, the Christopher Nolan directed Batman films. Now, if I had to pick one of these, I would pick The Dark Knight as my favorite superhero movie ever. That movie, I don't have any problems with it. It's 100% perfect, and I can't say anything about this movie that hasn't already been said about The Dark Knight. Just everything about The Dark Knight is perfect, but to me, I see The Dark Knight trilogy as one big movie. It's basically the quintessential example of the hero's journey. You see the hero rise, you see him fall, and then you see him rise again. The story's not just about Batman, it's about Bruce Wayne, it's about the villains, it's about the Commissioner, it's about Gotham. It proved that Batman was more than just campy fun, which Joel Schumacher made, infamous back in the 1990s. Gosh, I really am not a big fan of Batman Forever or Batman and Robin. They suck. But the Dark Knight trilogy is honestly something really special in my opinion, and if you haven't seen these movies, what are you waiting for? Batman cares about Gotham even if Gotham doesn't care about Batman. Everything in these movies just completely blows my mind, and I love all three to death. And so there you go. Those are my top 3 favorite comic book movies ever made. I love those movies. I think they're great. And if you want to check them out, I can't recommend them enough. I also want to thank Maria again for being on the show. Just go check her out. She's awesome. So what are your top 3 favorite comic book movies ever made? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Frame by Frame. Remember the name, and I'll see you in the next Frame by Frame film review.